Hi there, welcome back to my next episode in the series of Regret or Relief, talking about palettes I have decluttered and how I feel about not having them anymore. Do I regret getting rid of them? Do I miss them? Did I completely forget about them? If you've never been here before, hello, my name is Rachel, and I love to talk about eyeshadow. I upload several videos a week that are all eyeshadow related content. If you like what you see, I do hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing and hitting the notification bell before you go. Before I forget, I did film today's eyeshadow look. It's part of a reel and a YouTube short. I don't know if it's been published yet or if it's coming soon, but just keep an eye on my YouTube shorts or on my Instagram reels and you will see this eyeshadow look. Let's kick off today's video with my favorite brand, Udenzai. This is the Udenzai Mini Ocean palette. I had this one, I had bought it as part of a lot of Black Friday purchases the first year that I had really gotten into eyeshadow, and I was very excited about this color story. This was at a time where I wasn't yet familiar with my own aesthetic, or I can't even say wasn't familiar with, but really hadn't yet developed my own aesthetic. I hadn't figured out what formulas I liked working with or my preferred technique when it came to actually putting on eyeshadow. So really my purchases were down to color story. And over time, as that knowledge did build and I grew in my understanding of what I liked and how I liked to use it, this palette got less and less use. It ended up just taking up space. I still think that the color story is quite pretty, and some of the shimmers performed really well. The mattes, of course, performed very well, as they always do. Udenzai's formula has improved from this one, but there was one shade in here, I think it was the dark blue, and I just didn't enjoy playing with this dark blue. I haven't found this formula in their newer palettes. It was kind of like a dry, almost putty or Play-Doh sort of texture. It's also in the Norns palette, and it is my least favorite formula from Udenzai. Again, I have not seen this formula in their recent palettes, really since Norns, I think. But I thought this color story was lovely. It was just the dark blue that I didn't really get along with, and that was kind of the color that drew me in. So the fact that it didn't work great for me was a bit of a turnoff. Here now is the ColourPop Sandstone palette. I got this palette a little bit more recently, actually. I'd say within the last 8 months maybe. I bought this palette because I was starting to think maybe I should have some neutrals in my collection. My collection is almost all color, and I thought it's nice to just have the option of neutrals if I'm feeling that way, or if the occasion calls for something a bit more downplayed. I don't need to be a rainbow circus clown. I should probably have some neutrals, just round out my collection a little bit more. So I got the ColourPop Sandstone palette. This was actually given to me by a subscriber. I'd had my eye on it to buy secondhand, and then it ended up being in a box that a subscriber sent to me, which was really great. So I got to try it out. I liked this palette in general. I didn't love it. I found that, or I have learned rather, that my color preference for neutrals is cool tones because I have cool undertones in my skin, so these warm neutrals don't look as natural on me as cool tones do. This palette was decent quality. It certainly wasn't bad, but I have decluttered a lot of my ColourPop palettes. There are several more that will be talked about in this video because I just find that the formula doesn't excite me. I don't really enjoy working with the ColourPop formula as much as I enjoy working with other brands, and that's kind of what it comes down to. Also, this is a very neutral palette, and yes, I was trying to dive into the world of neutrals, but I have since done so in a way that is more tailored to what I'm looking for. Here is the Melt Amor y Mariposas palette. I never thought I was going to get rid of this palette. I was so excited when I found it. I found it for a great price secondhand. I think I paid $20 or $25 for it. I was stoked because everybody had been talking about this palette. Not everyone. It hadn't gone viral the way like the Beauty Bay Wilderness or the Cosmic Brushes Serenity palettes had blown things up. But this palette was pretty well talked over, and I thought it was just beautiful, and I knew that Melt was kind of a high-end brand, so I liked the idea of having something that was more luxe. I got this palette in the mail and I was very, very excited and delighted. I thought the packaging was beautiful. It felt very sturdy. It felt quality. It had a huge mirror and beautiful shadows. The reason that I decluttered this one, and this was recent actually, I sold it to a friend of mine. The reason I decluttered this was because by this point I have lots of other shadows in my collection. Again, in formulas that I do prefer slightly based on my technique, how I apply things. And also, I think the biggest thing was that with this Melt palette, there were no very light or even quite mid-tones. Everything verged on the darker side of things, and although I thought the colors were really beautiful, when it came to my eyeshadow aesthetic, I wanted something that gave me more of a range of depth from light to dark and things in the middle so that I could get more of a dynamic well-rounded look. And I thought that this palette, it did offer me beautiful darks, especially in the berry tones, and I really loved the greens in this as well. But there was nothing to work with. All of my looks, if I only used this palette, were going to be quite dark. So I ended up decluttering it. Again, beautiful, great quality. I especially liked the shimmers. The shimmers were so creamy and very impactful. I don't regret decluttering it. Like I said, I sold it to a friend of mine. Hopefully she's going to get some great use out of it. It's a high quality palette. It's just, it wasn't quite fitting what I'm looking for now when it comes to things that live in my collection and deserve their place. Let's talk about BH Cosmetics. BH Cosmetics filed for, there's a fly. Filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, I don't know, the end of last year maybe. And before that, they had launched a whole bunch of things that were really, really good quality. These are the BH Cosmetics Birthstone palettes. I had turquoise, garnet, opal, sapphire, and peridot. And I thought that they were great quality. They were really good quality. There's a playlist on my channel for BH Cosmetics in general, and the Birthstone palettes are in there. There might be a birthstone playlist. I don't remember because it's obviously been a while since I put anything in there, but there definitely is a BH Cosmetics playlist. I can card that above for you if you're interested. I had these 5 palettes and I thought that they were really good quality. My problem with each of them was the glitter. The glitter was terrible. As far as I was concerned, they were 6-pan palettes. The 7th was dead to me. That glitter was awful. While the colors were beautiful, and I thought the palettes were quite a nice balance overall. You had a good variety of shades within a small palette. I did declutter them because they were small palettes, and I don't like small palettes. Like, they just get lost. I forget about them. And I want something that offers me a little bit more choices and variety when it comes to what I can do versus having a palette that gives me maybe 3 or 4 looks. I just want a bit more than that. And also I decluttered these because they had glitters. I don't like pressed glitters. I love the idea of a brand launching a glitter palette for the people who really do love pressed glitters, but the majority of the market doesn't want them in the eyeshadow palettes, and for me they're a turnoff. I'm just not interested. I kind of miss owning that quality. I have great quality elsewhere, but I do very vividly remember the excellence of the quality of these palettes. Let's talk about one of the first very colorful palettes I bought. This is the Morphe James Charles mini palette. It's this, well, the mini. The big one was like this big. This one was just about that. And I got this one on someone else's recommendation way back early when I started doing eyeshadow, and I thought, hey, I can get this at Ulta and I don't have to go online and pay shipping, and I can just go to the store and pick up this palette that people say is good. After I bought the palette, I heard various theories about how the mini wasn't the same quality as the full size, and I had no idea, still have basically no idea who James Charles is. I don't really know anything about the creators or the palette itself and how it may compare to the larger one. I just felt that the mini was not very good quality, and I could tell that even so early in my makeup and eyeshadow journey. I didn't really enjoy working with it, honestly, and the color that it was so exciting to me was the bright green matte and the purple shimmer. Now the green matte worked pretty nicely. The purple shimmer was just kind of a dud. It was just there. It did nothing. It brought nothing to my looks. I really didn't like that shimmer, and that was disappointing to me, so I happily decluttered this palette. I didn't miss it. I don't miss it. When it was gone, I was glad it was no longer in my life. Talk about a couple ColourPop palettes. Here is the Misunderstood palette when they collaborated with Disney and the whole Villains franchise. I bought the Misunderstood palette and I really did enjoy using it for a while. I very much disliked that reflective background because I feel that it distorts the shadows themselves. It's harder to see what the true colors are when they're surrounded by this holographic rainbow effect. It was just very distracting. I've seen that background in several other palettes like ColourPop and BH Cosmetics. I really dislike the background when they do it like that. It detracts from the shadows. I did think that the palette quality was decent. Again, pretty standard ColourPop. It wasn't incredible, but it was good. The color selection was nice. I thought that the shimmers for what I'm looking for now were a little bit darker than I wanted, and I did end up decluttering this one. I don't miss it, but I had fun playing with it. Another ColourPop palette that I want to talk about is the Strawberry Shake palette. ColourPop had a whole bunch of monochromatic 9-pans, and Strawberry Shake was like their version of, I guess, a reddish pink one. I bought several of their 9-pans, and I have decluttered all the ones I've owned except for Orchid You Not and Mint to Be. So the Strawberry Shake palette, it was just a one-note wonder. It could give me one eyeshadow look, with maybe a slight hint of difference in whether or not I used a darker shimmer or a lighter shimmer. That was about it. Like, there were not any really good deep mattes in here, and then there were no really good bright, really pastel kinds of mattes to give me contrast light to dark. Everything was sort of sort of mid-toned-ish, and when I bought it, I didn't care. When I bought it, I was looking for nice washes of color, and ColourPop and their monochromatic palettes definitely offered that to me. But over time, I came to learn that I really like contrast in my eye look. So this palette, it couldn't offer me that, and I didn't really want to keep 9 shades that were all similar enough when I could have a 9-pan palette that had a lot of variety. So this one was out the door. One more BH palette to talk about here is the Cherry on Top from their Sweet Shop series. The Sweet Shop series was such a hit for BH Cosmetics. They were monochromatic more or less, and they were excellent, excellent quality. Here is the Cherry on Top. This was a lovely red palette. I was looking for red at the time, and I thought that this was a great palette to give me a couple different tones of red. Of course, we do have some lighter shimmers and some light-ish mattes, and then we go into a nice deep matte. There was a really good deep matte in this palette. And again, the quality was terrific. So I really enjoyed having this palette. Whenever I wanted a red shadow, I would think to pull this one. The problem was that this one on my skin tones always ended up verging towards the pink side of things. And if I wanted a true red, it was hard for me to find that in this palette unless I used that really deep shade. But if I wanted a lighter red, it just ended up looking pink. I found that using the reds in the Wilderness palette from Beauty Bay gave me more of a true red. Again, this is based on my skin tones. So while this was a great palette and it was totally worth the hype that all of the Sweet Shop palettes got, really, I ended up decluttering this one because I just didn't use it. We will end this video with 2 final palettes from ColourPop. We're going to talk about first the So Jaded palettes. This was their collaboration, one of a couple I think, with Kathleen Lights. And I thought, like, this was one of the first palettes I bought when I really got into eyeshadow. This palette was, again, quite well reviewed. Everyone talked about it. It was kind of the iconic ColourPop collab palette along with At First Sight from Raw Beauty Kristi, which I also own. Anyway, the So Jaded palette was nice. It was quite colorful, and I found that it was rather puzzling. When I looked at it early in my journey, I had so much trouble looking at this jumble of colors and trying to figure out a cohesive eyeshadow look. I really struggled with that. I thought that the colors were pretty. I really enjoyed the theme. I very much liked all of the stone names, and the packaging was beautiful, but I just had such a hard time coming up with looks and ideas. I wasn't far enough along in my journey to make this random smattering of colors make sense in my head. I know some people reorganized their So Jaded palette where they clumped colors together or clumped together little quads that they could use and stuff. I didn't have the interest in doing that. I kind of wanted the palette to simply work for me, and I knew that if I moved things around, the shades wouldn't match the names, and that would have annoyed me forever. So I thought this palette was nice. I thought the quality was just fine. It did have 1 or 2 pressed glitters, maybe 3. I think 2. I think I had 2 pressed glitters, and it was okay. I just wasn't using it enough, and I knew that because it was such a popular collector's item and limited edition, I would be able to sell it on to somebody who really did want it and would enjoy it more than I was. And finally, the Stone Cold Fox palette, another of ColourPop's mega palettes. I think So Jaded might have been their first, but then they exploded into these giant 30 pans. Again, it was just too big for me, but also quite boring. Very neutral, all obviously cool toned, silvery, mauvey, browny, all cool toned colors, the whole thing. And I found that A, the palette was just too big, and B, I just wasn't reaching for neutrals enough to warrant owning it. I could have done with a 9 or 6 pan neutral palette in this color scheme, and it would have served my purposes. You might know some of the neutral palettes that I have. I have Sea Talk from Udenzai, love it. I have the Anastasia Beverly Hills Nouveau palette, love it. Those are the neutral palettes that I'm into now. They're neutral with a twist. They have some interesting undertones. They have a couple of fun pops of color that draw the color lover of myself into them and still make them interesting, but also offer me neutrals. This Stone Cold Fox palette, I know this is some people's go-to for cool tone neutrals, and they really do make some beautiful looks, but for my own eyeshadow preferences, this is more what I'm going for. I'm not often going to reach for a giant neutral palette. So there you go. That's my little video on regret or relief palettes that I've decluttered and whether or not I missed them. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you will consider liking and subscribing before you go. Remember, I do upload several videos a week. Check my description box for lots of information, and I'll see you again soon in my next video. Bye!